So the open, high, low, close price bar is the foundational price bar, but there's different ways you can look at price graphically and visually as well too. And I'm going to show you some examples of that, and you might use different types of price bars that you can tell on your platform to basically reflect the chart the way you want it to look. You're the painter of the canvas, so to speak, so you can make the chart look the way you want. That might be easier to interpret. And then some price bars are better than others too, and particularly things like candlestick price bars. We have a whole section coming up on that, and that's a real important section, understanding those price bars and those price bar patterns with candlesticks. So we're going to save that for that section. But here are some examples of some different ways that you can look at price bars beyond just the open, high, low, close foundational price bar. One that's very common is the HLC bar, which should look pretty familiar. It's the high, low, and close bar. Is basically missing the O. It's missing the open, right? And if we look at the one on the left there, these are two examples, by the way, of high, low, close bars. And the one on the left is pretty obvious. You can see there's no tick mark on the left side of the vertical line. There's no indication of the open. There is an indication of the close, and that's the tick bar on the right, and the range, the high and the low, but no indication of the open. And that's why the reason for that is a lot of folks really aren't all that concerned for many cases around the opening. They're really fixating more on the closing price, giving more emphasis to that. So if you're like that, you can use and clean up the chart a little bit better. You can use an HLC or high, low, close. Sometimes you might see it represented like on the right, where they kind of put where it looks like there's a tick mark on the left, or essentially is, but it's a straight solid line across. And so to really make the close kind of stand out more, you can see there's no body or there's no left tick mark. It's just the same left and right. That can get a little confusing because it might tell you that the opening and the close were the same. But if you set it up as, and it's a high, low, close bar, you can use that type of look if you prefer that look, and just know that there's no openings being reflected in that at all. Now, when we look at candlesticks, you might see some candlestick patterns that actually look like these. So you have to kind of differentiate between the two, where the open and the close are at or near the same price. But in this example of HLC bars, there is no open. It's just another way we represent it. That's why particularly, me personally, I like the way on the left because it's real clear to me. But if you like the way on the right, that's okay too, Other ways that you can represent price as well are things like an area chart, for example, where you're looking at, things like, how does it look in terms of pricing things out and then having, kind of shaded underneath the price. So if you look at it, it almost looks like a mountain range, and you can see that it's, more kind of visual in terms of that aspect, but, it doesn't really clear out the lines, I think, as much as far as the prices. Doesn't really show you openings and closes. It's really just kind of showing you closes, and it kind of shows you some peaks and valleys. So that might be a way to look at, let's say, an area chart. Below that, you can see where it's just dots. It looks like it's a scatter diagram of dots, but it actually isn't. It actually is the closing prices just represented as dots. And you can kind of get a feel for where the lines might move from there, but that can seem a little more confusing to me, just as far as a personal opinion. On the bottom right, you'll see a real common chart, which is called a line chart. And you can see it's got black lines and red lines. Black would represent, in this case, that the finished higher, the high or the close was higher than the open, and red means it was a down day, that they closed lower than the open. So you can get a feel for open and close with the colors that way. And line charts can be helpful when we start looking at things like moving averages, and we're going to look at an indicator where you look at moving averages, and that's a line itself, and you want to look to see where that line crosses across different price things. And sometimes line charts can be very helpful to see where that crossing point is. And then the one above that is another line chart, just using dots basically to represent the pricing that way. So you can kind of choose the way that you like to see things represented. There's also price histograms, which are bars going up and down. They're showing basically the price, and it would be at the top of the bar. It would be the high price or the closing price, depending on how you set it, but typically it's the closing price. And the black bar would be a positive day, and red bar would be that was a lower day. And you can kind of see some direction things from that as far as a price histogram. Again, I don't like that. It doesn't show me a lot of information, but some things, histograms can be real effective. Like when we talk about the relative strength index, an indicator where you could use a histogram to make it more easier to understand. And I will show you that so you don't have to worry about that. But typically what you're going to see are those open, high, low, close price bars, or high, low, close, depending what you want. Maybe a line bar to or a line bar, price bar to show where there might be a crossover. And then the real big one that you're going to probably use a lot and really see a lot are candlesticks. Here's a representation of candlesticks, and you can see they look like candles with a body and a wick at the top, some of a wick at the bottom, at both ends. So that's coming up, and that's a section you definitely want to really look closely at when we get into candlesticks, which is really in effect another form of price bar based again on the foundation of the open, high, low, and close price bars, but they can tell you a lot more and really are very, very helpful for technical analysis.